Okay, pals, here we are at Hello Neman number 2, where we're going to talk about the next type of paragraph. We've done introductions, right? We've talked about various methods we can use to engage the reader in introductions. Now we're going to move on to the supporting paragraphs, the most important paragraphs, the 3 core paragraphs of the 5-paragraph essay, although we're going to talk about that in a new way. So let's dive right in. I'm going to talk about the word scaffolding in 2 different ways here. On the one hand, the idea of having a structure for writing an essay is a way of scaffolding students. On the other hand, the idea of following a text structure and a structured format for presenting information in paragraphs is a scaffold for your reader. So scaffolding takes on a whole broader sense. And I'm assuming you know from your ed classes that scaffolding is about providing support while learning takes place. And not only are our student writers learning, ideally the readers of our work, they too are learning. Yes? So it's another example where talking about a word can be helpful with students, so that you're not talking to them about I'm scaffolding you, but you're talking about their scaffolding their readers. Now, we've talked in class, excuse me, about what we hate in the 5-paragraph essay. The idea of, in this essay I will, first, second, third, and in conclusion, those sort of stem starters. Although we have also said that those stem starters can be really good for students who struggle, yes? It gives them the kind of structure that they need. Ooh, it scaffolds. The trick with scaffolding is that once the building is complete, like, once the Sistine Chapel is painted, the scaffold is removed. And many students will arrive to your class needing that scaffolding and maybe never letting it go. They might have to hold on to it for another year or 2 years. They might never get rid of it. The point is, we want them to feel comfortable writing, and if that helps them at the early stages, great. Your task is to get them to release those supports through revision. Anyway, the point of supporting, that's for supporting writers. The idea of supporting our readers is to say that these body paragraphs are designed to explain, expand, and develop the ideas that are raised in the controlling idea or thesis. Does that make sense? It's the idea of saying, I'm going to make a point, and here's the information that is going to explain it, expand it, develop it for you as my reader. Now, one of the things that Gallagher talks about, and that Neman sort of implies, although you might not get it just from the section you read, is while on the one hand we want to teach all these structures, on the other hand we can't teach them in a vacuum. It's like teaching grammar out of context, right? It's bullshit and it doesn't work. Well, teaching writing out of context is also problematic. So one of the things that Gallagher talks about is the downdraft or the sneeze, the idea that we give students some basic information, but we have to get them writing, because then once they've written, we can teach writing. And it's sort of what I was trying to do with the lesson plans for you, where I just gave you this, here, take this brand thing and turn it into a lesson plan, and you're like, what the fuck, Jerry? I don't even know what you're talking about. I'm new to this. It says, okay, now we've got something, and we can work from that something. Does that make sense? We've got to have something to work with, and working with things that are false, or working with things that we make up, or working with essays that are not their own. It's a good way to think about how we write, but teaching writing requires that they have their own words on the page in front of them. And when we say, where is your topic sentence? They say, oh, I don't have one. It's more meaningful. So that's what I really want you to keep thinking about. So although we're talking about these methods for teaching, and they're very systematic, and they seem to be dogged, and you will introduce them in phases, first thing we got to do is get students writing. So we give them some basic skills, and then we set them off to write. So if you go back and think about the idea of those various hooks, right? You might just teach them, in order to get them writing, one hook. Say, let's practice this introduction technique, this hook, and I want you to find a statistic or tell a story, because that would be starting from them. Then get them writing. So, okay, now do that, and now you can start writing an essay. I'm going to teach you this very basic paragraph structure. Topic, sentence, concrete, detail, commentary, claim, data, warrant, whatever phrase you want to use. Not going to go into a lot of detail, just these are the elements, and you might look at them in a sample essay, but don't spend too much time on it. Then send them home to write something, just a straight 5-paragraph essay. Now you can go back and say, let's take a look at your introduction. Let me show you some other possible hooks. Now, revise this introduction using these other possible hooks. Do you see what I'm getting at? It's the sort of contradiction of teaching writing. On the one hand, we want to teach them lots of things. On the other hand, we have to get them writing sooner rather than later. Okay, I've been ranting there for a second. My point is this, that getting them writing is key. So you might just teach them some basics at the outset, and then once you've reviewed the idea of the writing process and the whole 9 yards that's involved with invention, disposition, and style, you can go back and teach some of the other approaches. Does that make any sense? I feel like I've been babbling. You know, when I first started doing these chats, I wrote out all these long, detailed notes, and I still have like bullet points, but I'm not as long and detailed as I was in the notes that I wrote, so I tend to babble a little bit. But we'll see. Neman introduces this notion of paragraph cluster, and I like that because if you think about a 5-paragraph essay, right? Say we have our 3 body paragraphs. Well, no, you have 3 paragraph clusters that develop one of those 3 points, point 1, point 2, point 3. So a paragraph cluster might be 3 paragraphs to develop point 1. So you see how you've moved away from the 5-paragraph essay, but you're still really doing the 5-paragraph essay. So I happen to like that idea of a paragraph cluster, and this is her definition, right? A unit of prose in which a limited topic is stated and developed. Love that. So maybe that's part of the language we can create. And so what we do is we talk about how do we compose these segments. Some people call them paragraph chunks too, but the word chunk to me always makes me think of vomit, so I don't like thinking about it. And why that makes me think of vomit, I have absolutely no idea. Anyway, the other thing that thinking about paragraph clusters or segments or even chunks is that it reminds students that they don't have to say everything in one paragraph. They don't have to slam all their information in a single paragraph. They can develop it. Now we have to remind them that the intro/topic segment, the introduction, is different from the paragraph cluster and different from the conclusion. Make sense? Now we set up the topic segment with the topic sentence, duh. And one topic sentence can oversee or overarch multiple paragraphs, right? As long as those paragraphs all relate to that same topic, which is in the topic sentence. So we'll talk a little bit about transition sentences later in the semester. But right now we wanted to think about a topic sentence and what a topic sentence does, right? A topic sentence sets up the topic segment or the paragraph cluster or the chunk, choose your favorite word. All the sentences in that section, segment, chunk, cluster depend on that topic sentences. All roads go back to that topic sentence because that creates the focus for this section of your paper, right? All the information in the paragraphs that fall under that topic sentence should explicate, explain, develop, expand, or support, whatever words you want to use, that topic sentence. In a sense, then, the topic sentence organizes the entire segment. It's a signal to the reader, this is what we're going to start talking about. This is what you're going to be reading about. And therefore, it has to go up top. Don't make them guess what they're reading. Tell them. So it should be early in the paragraph, the first or the second sentence, because that's what the reader expects in terms of text structure. And when you are revising, you have to make sure that every sentence in that paragraph, cluster, segment, chunk, applies to that topic sentence. So topic sentences become vitally important. And think back about the although, I contend, because clause. If you say, although blank, I contend blank because 1, 2, 3, guess what your topic sentences are? 1, 2, 3. It's so perfect. It's genius, right? So keep your eye on that. Let's go. The reason we read essays in class is so that you can help students recognize what a topic sentence is, what it does, how it functions, or how not having one functions for a reader. So in the essays you read, you want to identify first off the thesis or controlling idea. That's the first thing you want. Shut up. That's the first thing you want to identify, right? Because all the topic sentences have to apply to that. So that's where you've got to start. Then one of the exercises that Peter does with his students in their own writing is he says, take your thesis, put it at the top of a paper, then cut and paste each topic sentence under that controlling idea. If they don't connect to that controlling idea, if they don't explain it, expand it, develop it, then somehow or other they're not right. You've either got to revise them or delete them. And you can do the same thing with an essay just by highlighting or by having students actually type out the controlling idea and the various topic sentences. Now they'll say, oh, not every essay we read has them. Guess what? That's because some people are professionals and they can get away with it. It depends on the audience. Because they are doing it in a professional piece of writing does not mean it is acceptable for students who are writing in an academic environment. And that's something you have to get through their head. Now you can play around with it. You could even say to them, and this is why I like the This American Life, take your formal essay and let's convert it into something that might be more user-friendly for a This American Life. What things could you change because they're a little bit more artistic? The point is you have to remind them that the environment in which they are writing at a university or in a high school has certain generic expectations, aka text structures, that they need to master. Now, central to each paragraph, central to each chunk, cluster, segment is going to be the supporting information that is offered, right? That is what determines the ethos of the author, right? So what constitutes support? Facts, statistics, quotations, interviews, analogies, anecdotes, sensory experience. It sounds like an entire This American Life has all of these things. Holy crap, I must be a freaking genius. And how do you teach support? You teach support using the essays that you read and the essays that students write. Everything you do to an essay that you read that is considered a quote-unquote professional essay, you do to the student's own writing. So you look at a segment of an essay. You decide if all the paragraphs relate back to the topic sentence, right? You decide what is the role of each paragraph. Is it explaining, expanding, or developing the topic sentence and the thesis? And then if it doesn't, you revise it. Even if you're working with professional stuff, even if you're working with Daisy Ann McLean, you go, you know what? She doesn't really have a good piece of support in here. So I'm going to revise her and make her more acceptable for the academic environment. Whatever it is, and think of how empowering that is. So whatever you do to the essays that you read, you do the same, but you practice, model, small group work with the professional example, and then you send them off independently to work on their own. And look at it. If you have specific things you're looking at in paragraphs, then you can use peer review effectively. So you say, look at your peer's essay and say, do all these paragraphs relate to the topic sentence? Now identify what this paragraph is doing. You don't have to have them revise the writer, but the point is you're giving them clear tasks that are actually beneficial and not, oh, I think you spelled this word wrong. Ooh, let me fix your comma, which is the bullshit that peer review turns into too often. And how do students come up with good support? The same invention strategies that you did when you were trying to find a topic, you can do for support. Brainstorm possible sources of support. Make lists of the information, the data before the data. Remember Hillick's, data, then claim data warrant. You can make clusters, you can cube, you can go back to my 5 W's and H. The other thing you want to do is get them to think about observation, not just looking at what they see around them, but looking closely at the text that they read. And I have this fish exercise about observation, not Stanley Fish, the actual like ichthyology or whatever that is, fish. And I think I might bring it in and have us read it because I really like doing it, and it might be a fun essay to read with your students. We'll see. I have to decide. I wish somebody would remind me because you know I'll forget. And the last type of paragraph that you need to teach students are concluding paragraphs. And it's a lot of the same stuff you do with introductions. You recognize it as a separate type of paragraph with a separate purpose, and you talk about what the purpose of that is, right? Ooh, crap, I think I just moved your thing, sorry. I was supposed to move it over here. So there are three keys to conclusions, and I'm going to run out of time, so I'm going to say them quickly. It has to wrap things up. It has to tie everything together. It has to flow from what precedes, and you have to hear the tone that was throughout the essay in the conclusion. Don't just suddenly change voice and become serious if you haven't been throughout. So you can restate the central point in terms of new ideas that you've raised, a restatement of the controlling point being strong and addressing the implications of your topic. You can echo ideas from the introduction and the body, a kind of summary statement, using the language or similar language that they've heard throughout the essay. So it harkens back, a kind of recapitulation of what's gone on, picking up on a main idea or a main theme. Oh my God, I'm going to get it in. And the last one is be yourself. Don't become a new person in the conclusion. Be the same voice that they've heard throughout. And we'll talk about this in more detail. I have 2 seconds left.